Good day, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to SPSP Medicine's WebEx series. My name is Jamie, and I will be your operator for today. At this time, all participants are in listen-only mode. If at any time you require assistance, please press *0, and I will be happy to assist you. I would now like to turn the conference over to your host for today, David Maxwell. Please proceed.
Thanks, Jamie, and welcome everyone again to our second of the WebEx series for 2017-18. We have our working title of today's WebEx being Medicine's Reconciliation Arose by Any Other Name. And we also want to note the fact that this WebEx is an all-in WebEx, and we'll be honest with you, this is our first time testing an all-in approach, so please be patient with us and let us know if there's any learning that we can do to improve this approach as we plan to use this type of WebEx throughout the 2017-18 series. So we'd like to welcome you all. I can see there's a number of people that joined, and we're expecting a number of colleagues as well from Northern Ireland and others who have actually picked up the WebEx series via Twitter and have really expressed interest to be part of our conversations today. So again, welcome to everybody. The objectives really of our WebEx today is really building on some conversations that we had in March this year at our Medication Reconciliation Summit, where really a challenge was put to us as a national team, but I think equally a challenge to all of us to really refresh medicine's reconciliation, and particularly focusing on what was the CMO letter of 2013, to look at more of a whole system approach for medicine's reconciliation, not just acute care. So hence the name of Arose by Any Other Name. But the purpose of today is really to explore ideas together. We're really here to learn from you about what inspires you when it comes to improving, making things safer, and particularly in the context of medicines, how else can we engage others, and what other levers are there in this broad agenda around medicine's reconciliation. But before we do, I just wanted to point out, and I thank everybody who was with us for the launch WebEx. For those who have not been on a WebEx with us before, it's really important that people actually dial in using the phone number and the passcode that's on your screen and also in the chat box. Really the point is that we're going to be able to open the phone lines in 2 points during the WebEx to get your opinions, but we're really wanting to make sure that we can use the chat box throughout the WebEx to actually continue getting your thoughts. We're going to be using a number of polling questions as well, and for those people who have not used polling questions before, we'll make sure we go through that just to make sure everyone's happy and confident in the way that we're going to do that. But as mentioned, we will open all of the phone lines twice throughout the WebEx to get some conversations going on the topic of Arose by Any Other Name. So for those who have not used the chat function before, the icon at the top right-hand corner of your screen called Chat is what you'll need to click on. And I think the most important part is when you actually pick who to send to, please make sure that you do select all participants, as that way everybody will be able to see the conversation and join in. There are options to send private messages, which is absolutely fine. However, if you do select other options like all attendees, we are not here as the hosts will not be able to see those messages. So please do ensure to pick all participants. Can I ask you now, just as a practice and making sure we've got people able to hear what we're doing just in a minute, can you use the chat box to introduce yourselves, to let us know where you're working and what your role is? We won't wait, we'll just wait and we'll continue with the WebEx, but if you can actually just use the chat box just now to let us know what your role is and where you're working, that'll be absolutely fantastic. And while you're doing that, I'd like to just introduce our team. When we launched the WebEx series last month, we mentioned the fact that we had probably a new person that was coming along, so it's an absolute privilege to introduce Kirsty. Kirsty's joined us as our administrative officer, and we have the pleasure of her company for kind of a full-time equivalent a week. So welcome to your first WebEx.
Thank you.
We've also got in the room Arvind, our national clinical lead, and Janet Heritage, our project officer, and myself. So we'd love to welcome you again to our second WebEx for this year. And thank you everybody who's introducing themselves in the chat box. That's absolutely fantastic. It also confirms that we can actually be heard, which is also a comfort. And welcome Mary from Shetland. I think you might be one of the furthest away from us at this point in time, so welcome. So just to confirm, in terms of the overall purpose of the WebEx series, we've got 3 key priority areas for SPSP Medicines for the next year, and they are focusing on the 3 core themes of transitions, omissions, and high-risk medicines. we did focus last year particularly on sharing around transitions as the core theme for the year, but as our learning and our understanding matures, it's fair to say that all of these things are very, very much interlinked. So we've purposely opened the WebEx series this year to focus on all three areas. So throughout 2017 and 18, we are hoping to be able to share with you a number of different aspects of improvements related to transitions, omissions, and high-risk medicine. But as mentioned today, this is a different approach. We're using an all-in approach today. The fact is that we are wanting to hear from you. We don't have a board presenting today. We're actually going to be using a number of questions and opportunities to use chat as well as polling to help us shape the work we will move forward in terms of the whole refresh. So again, we are phrasing these as all-ins. It's the first one, so please be gentle with us. And if there's any feedback that you can have that we can improve the way we run these over the year, we'd be most open to hearing that. So just as a test run and to get things started, I'd like to open the first polling question, and that is the polling of which of the following professions best describes you. So Jamie, can I ask you to open the poll, please?
Confirmed.
Thank you. So Jamie, can I ask you to close the poll, please?
It's closed.
Thank you very much. So for those who weren't on the launch WebEx, the results of these polling questions usually take about 15 to 20 seconds to appear. But for those people who have already indicated in their response that it's an other, can you please just type in the chat box, letting us know what professional group or profession would best describe you. And we'll just wait for those polling results to appear. There we go. So you can see here from the results, we've got the majority of people have identified themselves as a pharmacy profession. We've got 4 have identified themselves as other, and thanks Andrew for identifying yourself as being ambulant, and then 5 others that have not actually responded to these polling questions. And I would like to just confirm we're really keen to get everybody's input into these polling questions. So throughout there are another 7 to go. So we really ask that everybody get involved and let us know your thoughts. So thank you very much for that. It's great to see that we've got a broad representation of the professions across the WebEx today. So thank you. I'm just now going to hand you over to Arvind, who's going to start with some of the, I guess, more pointed questions in terms of how we might refresh medicine's reconciliation. So thanks, Arvind.
Thank you very much, David. So thank you very much for that. We're just deciding how we hand over control. Sorry for the slight delay. I should have thought of this earlier. So like David said, we at this WebEx are really looking to understand what inspires people and how can we engage people with work with medicine safety. So we were really keen to hear your views and your views expressed in the polls, but also in the chat box. And I'm really keen to hear more from each of you about it. Now, forgive me, I'm trying to work through the. Yeah. Okay. So the next question is. Sorry.
You've missed a polling question. That one.
Sorry, David just told me that I've missed a polling question. Forgive me, my IT skills haven't really helped today. So so the next question for you is, in order to move the work that we currently are doing already in medicine's reconciliation, which professional group do we most need to influence now? So that's to move from where we already are, which group should we influence? Medical, nursing, pharmacy, or other? And for this question, again, Jamie, can we open the poll now? And for those of you who type other, can you please write in the chat box who you think we should engage? Jamie, can we confirm that the poll is open?
Confirmed.
Thank you. Okay. Can we please close the poll now, Jamie?
That's confirmed.
Thank you. So thank you for that. And excellent. So we've got some results from the poll. And Jonathan, thank you for saying that we need to engage eHealth. Absolutely. We'd all agree with you on that. And Rachel, thank you for your response as well. So we can see from here that the majority of the people don't think that the main people to engage are the medical team, and that wouldn't come as a surprise to all of us who've been working on medicines reconciliation. The routine changeover of junior doctors every 4 months and the difficulties in engaging them in improving the work of medicines reconciliation is something all of us face. So thank you for that, and then we'll be looking to see how, particularly with the doctors, we can engage them. And thank you, Rachel, for the point about including patients and the SAS. And Andrew, of course, is very happy with the mention of SAS, as he's done a lot of work in that area. Engaging patients is something that we'll be hearing your views about over time, but perhaps not today. We're going to look at the the professions in the hospital in the first instance. So going on to the next question. Now, this is a question that has been sent to some people within NHS Lothian and people within the clinical advisory group for SPSP medicines, but I'm going to repeat that and want to explain the question first. So what we're asking here is for all of you to choose the phrase that most inspires you for a safety activity, but to try and ignore feasibility and past experience. So this isn't about how feasible it is to deliver it or not, but is there something about the language itself that would help make this more inspiring to participate in? So Jamie, can we have the poll question now, please?
Confirmed.
Thank you. I'm going to give this a little bit more time just because for many people who are seeing this question for the first time, it might require a little bit of thinking. Okay, I think let's close the poll now, Jamie. Thank you.
Confirmed.
Thank you. So while we're waiting for the results of this, I'm just going to move on to, oh, it's already there, sorry. It came out quicker. So high-risk medicines, sepsis 6, there are a couple of people who've chosen medicines reconciliation, antimicrobial stewardship, and a few people who've said no answer. That's interesting and in many ways what we were expecting based on polling other people, and I'll bring you the results of the polls that we had conducted already. So going on to these results. So the Medicines Clinical Advisory Group, for those of you who are not familiar with the idea, SPSP Medicines has a very small but well-formed team with a large remit, and we are well supported by people across Scotland from all the boards who actually advise us and check that what we say makes sense and related to the work in their own boards. So when we sent this to people in the Medicines Clinical Advisory Group, this is the result that we got. The phrases used here, you notice, are just 4. This is a small number of responses because the group is small, but VT prophylaxis came out on top, with sepsis 6 being the next most common one. I put this same question to a bigger group of people from Lothian, medicines safety group that I work with, just to get a feel for what people in my board would say. This question alone was put to them, and again, out there people chose sepsis and antimicrobial stewardship. I had responses from some of the participants indicating why they chose the particular area, and I'll share that with you later. But I'm really interested in understanding why any of us finds some of these names inspiring, because what I would like to do, what we as SPSP Medicines would like to do, is to make the name of the activity relating to medicines reconciliation something inspiring. So, and that might be medicines reconciliation itself, that need not change. But the question for all of you now is, for whatever phrase you chose, why did you find it the most inspiring? Jamie, can we open the poll, please?
Confirmed.
Thank you. Okay, can we close the poll, please?
Confirmed.
Thank you. And thank you for those of you who've been writing in the chat box as well. It's really helpful to hear while we go through this process of your views. I've realized how difficult it is to actually track the chat box at the same time as we talk. And for those of you who have written, if I don't pick up your comments straight away, we will talk about it later, and we'll analyze them later anyway. So in this, most of you, or the biggest number, have chosen the reason that there's an immediate connection to a high-risk activity. And I think this is something we expected even before we started thinking about the question, that most people in healthcare are inspired by something where we reduce the risk of something, and given all our various priorities, if it is a high-risk activity, it makes it easier for us to be engaged with it. And the name needs to be simple and make it sound achievable. There are people who said that sepsis 6, for example, given that it had a 6, felt like there were 6 activities and it was snappy, and thank you, Marie, for saying the same thing. It makes people think there are only a few things to do so they can do it. For some people, the word bundle gives the same feeling, that it's a group of activities that they can complete, whereas others have written saying they actually hate bundles and would never do it. So language is complicated, and I don't pretend to understand it enough to fully explore it, but it's helpful to know that something with high risk inspires all of us. Now, the interesting thing to me, given that we are a group that have self-selected from medicine's interest and have all been working on medicine's reconciliation, is that only a very small minority have chosen medicine's reconciliation. I'm really keen to know why. If, and I think the majority of us did not choose medicine's reconciliation, I would really be keen to know what makes medicine's reconciliation less inspiring than those other activities. While you continue to type that, I'm going to move on. Thank you. The chat box has just started responding, and we'll come back to those things. And thank you for Lindsay, Rona, Simon, Alexa, well, lots of people, and that's really helpful. Okay, so please continue to type your answers. I think it's helpful. Maureen, I love the comment that you've made. Doesn't say what it does on the tin, which to me really captures what a lot of people have said. They don't understand what it means, and therefore they don't engage with it. It's really helpful to have all your comments on this. So the next question is then, if we had to think about renaming it, and by no means do I or we have an authority to rename it just now, or maybe even in the future, but if we thought about hypothetically trying to do something and changing the name or the slogan of our activity in a way that people would want to participate in it, then what name for safety work in relation to medicines do you think will most engage staff, patients, and relatives? Jamie, can we open the poll, please?
Confirmed.
Thank you. Again, I'm giving it a little bit more time. Maureen, thank you for your comment. It would be good to hear what you would choose, but it is the difficulty. It is a wicked problem, and I think finding a name that inspires us could be really difficult. But it's fantastic, the number of different comments, and safe prescribing seems to be something a lot of people have chosen. Simon, thank you. Okay, thank you. Can we close the poll, please, and see what the response is, Jimmy?
Confirmed.
Simon, you've actually managed to silence everybody in the room, and I don't think anyone's ever done that before, so we'll give you credit, and it's recorded, so thank you very much. And that's, thank you all for that. So given the number of comments that had prescribing in it, I think excellence in prescribing has had votes, and I'm sure there are many other versions of prescribing. And maybe what this tells me is that we need to have a conversation about what adjective or verb relating to adverb relating to prescribing should then be the ideal phrase. But it clearly seems to be about prescribing that people want to bring up a phrase or a name. And we will be analyzing these comments during this call. We should have some time to discuss them later, but also subsequently we will discuss them and get back to you later. My colleagues are looking at me shocked because we won't have the time to analyze everything right now. But moving on to a question again about those things that you've chosen now, I'm just curious, for whatever you chose, and of course for those who chose no answer, it's different, but let's run this poll again to see why people would choose the one that they chose. And that doesn't mean, it doesn't have to be one of those that was in the list. It could be where you put in other, safe prescribing, for example. Why would that name engage staff, patients, and relatives best? Jamie, can we open this poll again, please?
Confirmed.
Thank you. Okay, I think, can we close the poll now, please, Jamie?
Confirmed.
Thank you. Worth doing it again after the initial question, because sometimes once we've got to give an answer, choose an option, we might be doing it for a reason differently from when we originally thought. So again, a lot of people have chosen an immediate connection to high-risk activity, something that's simple and sounds achievable, language that's positive about staff, and none of these things would come as surprises to anybody who's involved in patient safety work or any other type of quality improvement activity. So thank you for that. So perhaps the most important question for me of all is, would you support a change in the name of our activities from medicines reconciliation to an alternative? We've looked at several alternatives, one that we in the SP Medicines group made up, but many other alternatives that participants have given. Can we now run this poll, Jamie, and see what our participants think?
It is open.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jamie. Would you mind closing the poll, please? And I think this is probably one of the crux of the questions that we've been asking a number of people who've been visiting boards, and in fact our program board and nursing staff. So I think if we're ever going to go to an election and need a convincing result, we have it. So you can see here that 21 out of the 36 people on this call would be supportive of a name change. And absolutely saying we're not sure that changing the name will help, and thanks, Rona. We absolutely agree, but I think some of the feedback that we've been getting loud and clear as we've been going around boards is the terminology itself just doesn't resonate with what we're actually thinking is the activity involved. So that's some of the discussion we've been having. So I would like to take a pause just now, if we can, to give an opportunity for everybody to reflect and have a conversation. So, Jamie, would you mind opening all of the mics, please? Now, this is a bit of a risk. There's almost 40 people on the call, so it's likely that we're going to get some background noise. So if you can keep that to a minimum, that would be appreciated. But as I said, we're not saying we're absolutely going to change, and we're not saying that we're not open to change. But we've had some very polar opinions provided to us when we've asked this question about change. We've been advised by some people on the SPSP program board that this is actually a terminology that's been around for quite a while. Why would you risk changing it when people are actually used to it? The other extreme, which I think we've seen here today, that it's a term that's not well understood. So all of the mics are open, and I really would encourage people, if you've got a burning question or comment or any reflections on the discussion or the questions you've had so far, please speak up now. So I will be quiet. Anyone willing to say their piece?
Yeah, hello, it's Simon here in Edinburgh. Just briefly to say, I think everybody has got a bit fed up with medicines reconciliation, and I think a real mistake was right back at the start, because I think the definition was completely wrong. I'm not sure I understand, I'm supposed to, but I'm not sure I really understand what medicines reconciliation is. It's all seemed to have focused around trying to translate a list of medicines that a patient was on before they came into hospital into what they're on in hospital, and then make sure that what they're on in hospital, they then get the appropriate message out of hospital, plus other transitions of care. I think the difficulty is that actually medicines reconciliation is an ongoing process, and it should be known as rational prescribing, because we reconcile medicines every day in the hospital on the wards. The circumstances change, and so the patient's treatment needs to change. Just as when they come into hospital, reconciling the medicines isn't just, as everyone on this call knows, about trying to find out all the lists that the patient was on before. There's actually big changes happen, because that's an opportunity when a multi-professional team gets together and reviews what's happening. So I would strongly support a move away from that terminology, and all the effort and money and resource which is going into medicines reconciliation, I think a lot of it should now be diverted into trying to make sure that our workforce is appropriately trained and supported to make sure that day to day, whether that's in hospital or primary care, they are making rational, appropriate, safe decisions regarding the medicines that patients are being prescribed.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for that, Simon. Very clearly described the problem as most of us see it, and when the professor of pharmacology says it's not clear, then it really does describe the problem that the phrase medicines reconciliation is difficult to understand, and rational prescribing is a good choice and really is what I would aspire to do. And there are many phrases like that, and I think it's really helpful to hear your views on this. Thank you. Anybody else?
Hi, this is Shadi Buttress from Tayside. I think I'm pretty supportive of the idea, and I think it's certainly one way of exploring how we can sort of tackle this chronic problem that we've had with medicines reconciliation or getting medicines right in one way or another. I think we just need to be slightly careful that we don't, by doing this, imply that the main problem lies just in the terminology itself, and that would fix the problem. I think to me, it's a way of actually it's a new way of trying to engage more members of the multidisciplinary team to engage with the concept of reconciling medicines, and if giving it a new name and refreshing that concept will get people more engaged and more excited to take part and sort of, play a role in that, then I think that certainly is something that will be really welcomed by everybody, not just in the school, but, anywhere in healthcare for that matter. But I think there's also something to be conscious of that, MedRec or Medicines Reconciliation as a brand or as a name has had a lot of time and effort invested into it. And I think probably we need to be conscious not to lose some of that momentum and the time and the effort that's been invested into that as well. And I don't know how you square that circle, but it's just something to be conscious of as we move forward with that.
Shari, thank you for that. And given your excellent work with getting Medicines Reconciliation spread to nurses and the high-quality work that's been created, I think that's a very helpful view for us to keep in mind. When we presented this idea to the SPSP program board, we had a very similar caution expressed that this is an area where people have put in a lot of work, and there are some places where there's really high-quality work. So whatever we do, we shouldn't lose the work that's already been done. In my mind, anyway, it isn't simply about changing the name. I think if we simply change the name and did nothing else, people would see it as being very tokenistic and perhaps manipulative even. Like Simon Maxwell stated very clearly, the process that we are measuring and the process that we are inspiring and training doctors and others to do itself has to be more clearly defined and perhaps looked at. And in my mind, it's very clear that the medicines reconciliation yardsticks will be part of the rational prescribing as well. I don't think anybody can prescribe rationally without checking two sources, without comparing them, without knowing about allergies, etc. But it's clearly more than that, and maybe we'll bring that forward. Any other comments or questions?
Hi, it's Maureen Lafferty here. I agree with a lot of the comments. I think just changing the name doesn't make the process any easier, and it's a very difficult process, complex process to do, and it's not. And it is a multidisciplinary process to do well. But I think it is about finding language that engages people, that is explicit about what you're trying to do. And I'm really keen, and I haven't found the magic words, but it's something that patients understand as well when we're talking about it. If we could find that combination, then I think we've potentially got a way of building on engagement.
Thank you very much. Yes, that would be ideal, and perhaps we need to find a process. We need to ask everybody how we do that, how we engage patients. A great question, a great comment. Anybody else? We can come back to comments again and questions again later. What we are going to do now is move slightly forward to see what our activity might be. So one of the things that Simon mentioned was about having our junior doctors appropriately trained and supported in rational prescribing. It struck me very recently that I fill out forms for people on various activities, junior doctors for their activities with patients, whether they put in a cannula appropriately or not, whether they can take a blood gas sample or not. But the most dangerous thing, or the highest risk activity that most junior doctors undertake is prescribing, and I do not formally fill out a form for their supervised learning in this event. So the question that I wanted to ask is, do you feel that having a supervised learning event, something in their e-portfolio, it doesn't have to be excellence in prescribing, forget the name, but a name relating to prescribing, but an activity relating to prescribing, will that improve safety of medicines across transitions, whatever we call it? Jamie, can we open the poll, please?
Poll is open.
Thank you. Thank you. Can we close the poll, please?
Confirmed.
Thank you for your comments. Simon Maxwell, the assessment tool that's being developed nationally is a fantastic thing, and perhaps you can tell us whether that's meant to come into ePortfolio or whether it's an assessment tool for junior doctors, for medical students. And thank you for your response. Yes, I'm glad to see most people agree with the idea of having something. From what Simon Maxwell said, there is something that that will be coming up for junior doctors. My colleague David Maxwell did challenge me, and David, can you just tell everybody what you thought about that question?
Sure, and I think that we're probably a lot of people on the call that are aware that it's not just junior medical officers that are doing prescribing. So for me, for terminology and the target groups we're talking about, this is really about prescribers. So I would think that anybody that's got prescribing in their day-to-day responsibilities, we would want to be able to capture some kind of supervised learning event in practice. And I think, you know, there are comments saying, isn't this done in undergraduates? And I absolutely agree it is. But I think, as Arvind has pointed out, once people are qualified and out in the field, we're not necessarily seeing the supervision around prescribing, that there are other activities that are more closely scrutinized. So again, the chat in this is absolutely amazing. Just from a personal perspective, if we were to look at the chat box in a WebEx maybe 6 months ago, we've probably more than quadrupled the amount of conversation that's going on. So can I thank you as well, because this is all information we're going to obviously use after the WebEx. So my rounded point would be, I think we need to move away from just focusing on medical trainees. They need to be anybody that's got prescribing in their day-to-day practice.
Thank you, David, and thank you, Simon Dama, as well, for sharing the idea that there are lots of things that we ask our prescribers to evidence, and it will be many of them are less important. I particularly liked the comment from Lindsay, which was that you like the idea, but just not absolutely. That's great. Clear quality improvement perspective that things are good, but perhaps not everything. There are a few, sorry, yes, no, I see that. So for those of you who said it won't make any difference, it would be interesting to hear more about why as well, and I would love to know that, and it would be a caution for us if and when we move forward, whether it's going to be the framework of the assessments or whether it would be that this should never be done. I think, so Rachel, the question about whether it's for primary care as well, I believe it should be, but what it would be in primary care is something I cannot imagine, because I think it requires people who are in primary care to then define what would be an appropriate way to assess prescribing in primary care. So moving on, and I'm very keenly reading the comments instead of moving on with the presentation because it's so interesting. But I'm going to put forward this is just my idea right now, pulling together a few things to try and keep an assessment process small enough so it can be done reasonably easily, but still covering the most important aspects of what I see as good prescribing. I know that many people out there, there's Simon Maxwell, there are so many pharmacists with far more experience in actually assessing safety here would probably have better ideas than this. So I'm really keen for you to look at this and tell me what you would add to it. But this is what is maybe a proposal for a starter, what the criteria are. I bet Simon's already looked at some of this within the national work for medical students. Would it be exactly the same when we look at it for junior doctors? And as you can see, most of the criteria here, or all the criteria under medicines reconciliation, are also part of excellence in prescribing, according to me, and that's not a surprise. So the next question, for those of you who, if you finish reading it, I'm going to move on. Sorry. So what I'd like to know now, there was a question about what you thought about it, but what I'd like to know is, in the chat box, could you type what you think about these ideas? Thank you. So can we, for a few minutes, open the lines again so we can hear from people? There are lots of comments, and it would be really helpful to hear more from the participants about what you think. Jamie, can we open all the lines, please?
All lines are open.
Thank you. So, Simon Maxwell, can I come back to you first? Thank you for talking about the prescribing competency assessment. Could you tell us a little bit more about it, please?
Well, very briefly, because I don't want to hog the airwaves. I'm sure others have got great ideas. I mean, I've just typed in, it needs this addressing quality, safety, vectors of prescribing requires a multi-pronged approach. We, as some round the call will know, we've developed over the last 5 or 6 years a prescribing safety assessment, which is an online tool, so it's easy to apply, and all medical graduates now have to pass this, whether they're from UK schools or overseas, before they're allowed into the foundation program. That's not the whole solution. It's not even half the solution, but what we found is that that's very significantly focused minds around the need to consider safety and quality and prescribing as part of the training process. And at the moment, Arvind, we have been in discussions with various groups about using it as a practice tool, because it's not really the fact that it's just been a hurdle, it's the fact that it has led to people actually practicing prescribing and getting feedback. So I think that's right. I think others have typed into the box and talked about the need for a whole cultural change. I mean, we have to stop prescribing being something that is just devolved round to the most junior member of the team as a task to rapidly do at the end of a ward round. I think everybody's business should be focusing on the prescription chart, making sure that particularly the high-risk medicines have been taken into account, working in a multidisciplinary way, obviously with the clinical pharmacy team. You know, from top to bottom of organizations, I think we need to change the approach and the importance that this area of practice is given. But I'd be very happy to talk to you after this meeting about the possibility of just applying some simple, you know, online prescribing exercises with feedback, which I think might be quite valuable.
Irvin, could I come in there? Simon, it's Fiona Mitchell-Hill from Grampian here. Simon, are you able to share that tool that you're using?
Well, it's widely applied. I mean, it actually belongs to the British Pharmacological Society, but you know, I think we'd be more than happy to, you know, speak with HIS or SPSP and apply it. But you can go and see it and find out what it's about. I mean, it's being used by every single medical school, and most pharmacy schools have been involved in running pilots. So it is a tool which could be available.
Super. Thanks, Simon. We'll go and look into that.
Thank you.
I'll circulate later some details about, you know, there's a publication about it.
Simon, if you want to direct that just to the team here, we're more than happy to then distribute it out, so that in terms of the people on the call today.
So there are so many comments here, and I'm going to pick some that that are both interesting and I think would be really helpful for me to learn. If anybody else wants to comment, please jump in. Maureen English, the comment that you made about it not being just about trainees presumably means that people at all seniority levels should be doing this. Just to say, when I fill in forms on the e-portfolio, I do learn about how things should be done as well. And part of the idea was having it there would help everybody. But what would you do? How would we build this for others?
Hi, it's Monica. I think it's the whole team engagement, so that it's seen as something that's important, and you know, an activity that needs to be recognised as being an important priority to do as part of safe care. So I think it's that whole team giving it that visibility and that importance.
Absolutely. Thank you. Yes, I think multidisciplinary and teamwork are things that we should be supporting in this. And there is, Stuart, your comment about how HEPMA would help and move things forward substantially. Of course, we all recognize that a lot of transcribing errors potentially will be reduced. It's not there everywhere. We still have to have a process that helps us in the meantime, and also because even with electronic prescribing, people sometimes make errors because they don't ask the patient, and there are papers suggesting that. But it's a good point, and yes, it should help.
So can I just pick up on the comment below? And Jackie, are you still on the call from Escher and Aaron? Because I know up until recently, Escher and Aaron was the go-to board when it came to HEPMA, and I'm really particularly interested in picking up your comment that it currently doesn't help with MedsRec, and I think I understand where you're coming from in the fact that it's not an integrated system with any of the other interfaces. Do you want to comment on that any further?
Yeah, absolutely, David. I mean, we've obviously had a history of using HEPMA for quite a number of years in Ayrshire now, and yeah, absolutely, it makes everything much more legible, and you can read everything, but you can still put the wrong information in. It's not as clever as stopping the wrong information going on. So you can still prescribe something that's the wrong dose. If you haven't done MedRec correctly, though, and haven't got a proper history from the patient, they will still not prescribe certain medicines to the patient either, and those could be omitted. So doesn't really help with the medicines reconciliation process. We still have to do that as a manual process. I know there are some discussions with the software company that we have for HEPMA, JC. There's some discussions going on with them to try and see if there could be some model that they have on the system, but I know that's been ongoing for quite some time. But I suppose it's just I think a lot of people think HEPMA solves everything, and yeah, it's excellent for some things, but you still have to go through the medicines reconciliation process manually, just as everyone else does.
Thank you for that comment.
Stuart here. I'm not sure if you can hear me.
Yes, I can.
Yeah, Grant. I'm under no illusions that HEPMA would solve all the problems, but I think the key thing it would do for MedRec would be only if it links to the GP summary.
Yeah, I would agree, yes.
That I think is a key thing, because that would allow you to download your starter for 10. This is what the GP summary says the patient's on. You're bound then still to get errors, because people doing that will just take that as being the perfect medication list as opposed to going through it and checking, but it would significantly reduce the workload, and that's something I think has been missing from MedRec. We're just asking people to do more. Do what you're doing now in a better, more thorough way. It's going to take you longer. Whereas I think if you can get a system change like HEPMA linking up to a primary care IT system, you can say, use this because it's going to make your life quicker and to make your job quicker, it'll make your life easier, and it's going to be more accurate than the system we have at the moment. So that's the only big step forward that I can see, but obviously it's predicated on a big IT change that isn't going to happen overnight.
No, it's Stuart, and it's David here. I would absolutely agree. This change is not something that is going to happen overnight. There is certainly a plan, as probably almost everybody on the call knows, of a HEPMA rollout across the country in a staged approach. But we are looking at the fact that we're talking about bolt-ons. So these would be in addition to the current bog standard, if you like, for want of a better expression, of the prescribing and administration aspects of the JAC product, which the 3 boards in Scotland that have currently got HEPMA are using. So, and we're learning our way through that as well as a national team, having worked in a board that's used HEPMA before. So this is a big learning curve for us as well. I think in the interest of time, and it's really unfortunate that I say this, we've only got 5 minutes to go. We do need to conclude the discussion. But can I ask if there's any points that you've not had a chance to say? There's 5 minutes to get your opinions in the chat box, because we are going to get a copy of all of the chat, and we'll be able to go through that as part of our follow-up from today. So
and can I just add to that we'd be very grateful for your views if you think of something later, if you email us, because this is something that's really very important to us.
Okay. And thanks, Rachel. I know I was going to mention the fact that there is a test going on, and I think we'll be watching very closely, Rachel, in terms of how the test in GG&C goes, where the ECS is pulling into another interface through Orion to actually form the IDL. So that's reducing any of the transcriptions. So we really would look forward to hearing the results of that. And I do think one of the challenges, though, this is a board-by-board approach. We don't really have a national solution being progressed at the minute, but that's probably my own personal opinion on that. So just to conclude, before we do close, we are going to be joining again on the 20th of July to hear from our colleagues from Northern Ireland, who are going to be sharing their experience to date on medicines reconciliation, and they've called their presentation The Human Steps on the Giant Causeway of Medicines Reconciliation. So we're really looking forward to hearing from them. But as promised too, our WebEx series is going to focus on other topics around our key priority areas of medication emissions, as well as MedRec and high-risk medicines. So on the 17th of August, GG&C are going to be sharing their work looking at human factors around medication administration errors, and also some testing that's going on in the west of GG&C involving patients and self-verifying their MedRec on admission to hospital, because that is one of the areas I think we've talked about briefly about how we better engage in patients. So again, I'm really looking forward to hearing the results of the testing work that's involving patients with them. So just to say that next, on 3 p.m., the 18th of July, we're going to be hearing from Jane Agnew and Brenda. And if you want to get in touch with us before then, please do contact us either via email. You can get more information through on the website, and the recording of today's WebEx, along with all of the slides and the chat, will be available within the next week. And of course, if you're not already following us on Twitter, please do. We're really committed to using Twitter as a way of sharing information and other articles. So if you do want to keep up to date with what we're doing, that's probably a really good way of doing that. So if there are no other burning questions or any other final pieces of conversation, can I just draw this WebEx to a close? Thank you all very, very much for your contribution, and we really do look forward to working with you as we go forward. And I think from Rachel's perspective, I will finish with a famous quote: there is nothing so useless as doing efficiently that which should not need to be done at all. A single patient record, please. I would agree with that plea. And on that note, thank you all very much, and we look forward to meeting with you again. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes today's conference. Thank you for your participation. You may now disconnect.